Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swing and a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Matt Moreno. Matt, lockout, how we doing? You surviving 2022 here with no real baseball news?
I'm starting to get a little antsy. I'm ready for the at least CBA negotiations to start. It's a new year. Let's get the two sides back at the table and get things going. Because really, spring training, as much as the games start late February, pitchers and catchers report in the middle of next month, which is going to be here in a hurry.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, at least we've got some Dodger stuff to talk about. Shout out to the LA Times for getting an interview with Max Scherzer where he goes on to clarify comments that he made about the Dodgers. If you're new to this story, Scherzer, of course, signs a 3-year, $130 million contract with the Mets, and in that introductory press conference, basically went guns blazing on the Dodgers, saying all of his arm issues were the fault of the Dodgers, and they handled him wrong, and they didn't let him pitch enough, yada, yada, yada. Well, then he comes in this LA Times article and sort of backtracks basically as much as he possibly could, clarifying his comments and saying, hey, I apologize if this was misinterpreted. I don't blame the Dodgers. He at one point said, I apologize if I didn't make myself clear enough the first time, as if there was another way to interpret, like as if he could have meant something other than what he seemed to say. So what do you make of this LA Times interview, which is a great interview, by the way, but what do you make of him sort of backtracking his comments now?
I think you could argue that it was a little bit expected because he did get a ton of criticism. And people were questioning, like saying that doesn't make any sense.
Right, statistically, he was pushed back against.
Right, when he made his initial comment that the workload the Dodgers had for him after getting traded to the team is what, set him up for failure, basically. I think what struck me, and it could just have been the timing because of, the lockout and maybe Scherzer just taking time to be with his family, but there was a decent amount of time. Like, this was unexpected.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like this just came out of nowhere. It wasn't like, and Jorge Castillo of the LA Times is who got the interview, and they have a relationship from when Castillo was covering Scherzer while they were both in Washington, D.C. So there is some familiarity there. So to see that was who got the interview made sense. But for the amount of time that went by, that's what kind of struck me as, well, wait a minute. Like, this was already sort of water under the bridge. Like, you withstood the firestorm early on. Yeah. And now here you are, you're going to stoke the fire again. I still don't see Scherzer's reasoning.
Yeah.
I know it was broken down if you looked at his pitches and his innings and all that from when, because he keeps comparing it to what he did for the Nationals in 2019. And to finish out that regular season compared to what he did with the Dodgers was pretty much identical. Yeah. And I think what he is also sort of leaving out is he dealt with a hamstring issue while with the Dodgers. Yeah. So they had to monitor, like, what were they supposed to do? Yeah. Hey, your hamstring is bothering you, but keep throwing because we want you to get to 120 pitches. Like, that would have been a moot point if he blows out his hamstring.
Yeah. Yeah, Scherzer's argument here is basically that what happened is he goes to Dave Roberts early in the postseason and says, hey, 2019, we won the World Series. I came out of the bullpen. If you need me, I'm available. So he pitches the wild card game. He pitches game 3 of the NLDS. And then he pitches the 9th inning of Game 5, of course, just 3 days later. Game 2 of the NLCS, he comes back, lasts just 4 1/3. Couldn't pitch Game 6, said he would have been available for Game 7. And the reason he says that he ended up having arm fatigue is because the Dodgers basically used him wrong. And his new line of thinking is that, well, I didn't pitch every 5 days. They were saving me and Buehler and Urias. And he says, hey, I understand why they did this, but we were pitching every 6th day instead of every 5th day. Therefore, my arm wasn't built up enough. And so while I thought I could replicate that 2019 experience, in hindsight, I look back, they didn't use me enough. My arm wasn't strong enough. We couldn't do it. Castillo goes on to point out in 2019, he averaged 103 pitches that year, which is more than he did this year by about 7, but he also made just 27 starts. It was a career low number of starts. He made 96 pitches per start in his final 9 starts with the Dodgers. One of those was cut short by the hamstring injury you mentioned. But I love this line from Castillo. This is what got me. Quote, with the Cy Young Award within reach, he probably would have been given the green light to pitch deep in his final 2 starts, but he gave up 10 earned runs in 10 1/3 innings pitched. It was such a perfect moment because it's like, hey, maybe part of the reason that you didn't get to pitch as often is because your last 2 starts weren't very good, because you were injured in one. Obviously, he had the weird rain delay game in there. So a lot of this was out of the control of the Dodgers. And so while initially he said this is the Dodgers' fault, it at least seems like he's trying to take some blame and say, I misinterpreted the facts, but oh, by the way, the reason I misinterpreted the facts was because it was the Dodgers' fault. Like, it's just a very bizarre thing to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think all of this being said, like there isn't one reason
Right.
that his arm, gave out on him basically. And we could take it back further to even right before the trade deadline, he had a triceps issue that then some people were wondering, are the Nationals going to be able to trade him?
Yeah.
Is their return going to be diminished a little bit because there's some concern? How serious is that? So you could go, multiple ways. And we've discussed this at length. I didn't necessarily blame the Dodgers for using Max Scherzer in Game 5 to close out the Giants, the NLDS. What I just didn't necessarily agree with was it seemed like they committed to that plan sort of no matter what,
100%.
which I wouldn't have necessarily done. And then after you got into that situation where you had to use him in the save, I would have held him until Game 3 of the NLCS just to give him that extra rest to be sure, because that wasn't the World Series. So
Right.
even if you get through the NLCS, you obviously need, another round. And so, you could go back and kind of dissect this a million ways, and you could say this was the reason, that was the reason. There are multiple parts to it, and nobody's to truly blame. Not Max Scherzer for volunteering, not the Dodgers for kind of curtailing his workload. And I think the way Scherzer has phrased it repeatedly is they lowered his capacity. Just an interesting scenario.
He has a very fascinating sort of stay as a Dodger, because obviously he comes over in this big trade, unbelievable for his first 9, 10, 11 starts, however many it was, struggles the last 2, saves Game 5, pitches a wild card game, saves Game 5, a couple huge moments for the Dodgers, and then it's over. They don't win the World Series, and he goes out kind of burning the bridges behind him. So what do you make of his tenure with the Dodgers? Like, when you think back to Max Scherzer as a Dodger, will that be viewed as a positive era? Will that be a forgettable era? Will it be what will you think about?
I think it'll be a little bit more forgettable in the sense that it just be kind of neutral.
Yeah.
Like, he came, they needed him. He provided a big boost. He went on a historic run during the regular season with them, and that was fun. He dominated the Astros at Dodger Stadium, which had sent the fans even into more of a frenzy beyond the fact that the Dodgers had just traded for Max Scherzer. But then, it kind of flamed out. I think some of the hostility that got drummed up with his comments after signing with the Mets has worn off and will wear off. And I don't think that'll necessarily be held against him. It'll just be like, oh, Max Scherzer pitched for the Dodgers. That was kind of cool. Didn't work out. Hey, life moves on.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Jim Thome era with the Dodgers, where it's like, hey, there was that Hall of Famer that was here. Fred McGriff, remember him? He was a Dodger. Obviously Scherzer was much better than both of those guys when they came. But yeah, I mean, anybody who watches the shows know that like the Game 5 save for me will always be an all-time Dodger moment, and he was there, and so obviously I'll remember that. He was great. But yeah, it just, like I said, I think it complicates how he will be remembered, because A, it was such a short time. B, it was up and down not being able to make the start in the NLCS. It's a very bizarre thing. And obviously I think Trey Turner still being here for a year makes that trade even more unique, because Trey Turner is going to be the center point of that trade. Hopefully a guy that the Dodgers lock up long term. So I'd love to hear from fans. I mean, what will you make of Max Scherzer's tenure as a Dodger? Will it be positive? Will it be negative? Or will it be somewhere in the middle and you just kind of forget it happens from time to time? Let us know below. That's Matt Moreno. My name's Jeff Spiegel. We appreciate you joining us. Click subscribe, ring the notification bell. We'd very much appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you next time.